Next up, we have an exciting conversation about confronting the China threat. Unfortunately, our panelist, Rose Tennant, our radio host friend, was not able to be here because her radio host of many years passed away. So in place of Rose, we have the one and only Jeffrey Lord. That's right, give him a hand, give him a hand. And he'll be speaking with Joshua Philipp, who is an award-winning journalist. He is the host of Crossroads. He's a senior investigative reporter at the Epoch Times. His works have included breakthrough investigations in the origin of COVID-19 and the Wuhan laboratory in the early days of the pandemic. Joshua has also traveled to Panama, to the Darien Gap, to investigate the border crisis and expose the global programs that were facilitating the mass movement of people. Joshua is also a leading expert on Chinese unconventional warfare and front operations, which he has investigated and exposed since 2008. He frequently speaks on television, podcasts, and a broad range of topics. We are excited to have him here. Would you please welcome Jeffrey Lord and Joshua Philipp. Good morning, guys. Come on out.
Thank you.
Take it over.
All right. Well, thank you. As you can see, I am not Rose Tennant. Our friend Rose is at pulling funeral duty today for her longtime radio partner, Jim Quinn. So it's kind of sad. So we miss her, and our thoughts and prayers are with her today. So we are here to talk with Josh Phillips. You've heard his resume, and I want to start this conversation on China by holding up a book that I had to read when I was in college. This is quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong. And it starts out by saying, "Workers of all countries unite."
Yeah, there you go.
So my first question is we're a ways down the road from Mao. And, you know, in our own country, presidents come and go and things change. Has anything changed from Chairman Mao's days in China?
Nothing has changed since the days of Chairman Mao. I'd say actually, all right, I want to pose a question to everyone here. What is one of the key goals of Marxism? If you were to read Marxism or Mao and what he's aimed to do with China, what is one of the key goals? To seize the means of production. Who controls the means of production right now? China, that is right. And who warned about this? Who warned this would happen to us? Well, you might have seen some of these videos going around. You have Nancy Pelosi, 1996, warning about it. It sounds like Trump speaking. You know, people are watching this and they're saying, you know, what happened to our country? How did we get here? You know, if you would have had a Republican member of Congress give that exact same speech, it would have been just as relevant right now.
Wow.
And what happened is this, right? The thinking of this is this. Production, factories, it's not just about business. It's about jobs, it's about natural resources, it's about the control of production, it's about military production if it comes down to it. It's who controls the economy of the country and who controls the interests of the voters in the country, because that's the jobs, that's the money, that's the livelihood. And when people go and, you know, cast their votes, they're going to cast the votes in the interest of their livelihood. If you've offshored your livelihood, they're going to be the ones influencing you. And where are we now? When you look at what people care about, when people are, you know, wondering, hey, where did my job go? Why can I not afford a house anymore? Where is the, you know, if China decides to cut off rare earth minerals, does that mean that I can't have a computer or a phone? Even militarily, they're looking at this now. And so I would say that Mao Zedong, and what he talked about, is still very much relevant. And I'd make one more point with that, too. One of the key quotes of Mao Zedong was also something very important. From the very beginning, Mao's goal was basically to destroy, I mean, not even basically, it was to destroy the United States. The thinking of the Chinese Communist Party was then and still is that the Chinese Communist Party cannot coexist in the same world as the United States. The exact slogan is, "We live, you die." They do not believe they can coexist with us. And so the goal on every communist leader, including right now with Xi Jinping, even when they did the reforms and opening up and we gave them most favored nation trading status and allowed the offshoring of our factories, even then, the slogan was, "We live, you die." And it's still, right now, that is the goal of the party.
Where do we stand on the stories we have seen about farmland in the United States being purchased by China?
Well, again, I go down to the issue of who controls the means of production, and this ties into what is China has many forms of warfare. They talk about unrestricted warfare. You talk about propaganda warfare, drug warfare, like fentanyl. They regard this as war. That was actually a Mao Zedong era program where he wanted to replicate the Opium War using Cuba as the proxy to wage drug war on the United States. A great book on this, Red Cocaine by Joseph Douglas. Very well laid out history. It was intentional. Culture warfare. Who controls TikTok? Who controls Tencent, which is buying up all your kids' video game companies, for example? China, right? They're trying to control them. Who's buying up Hollywood? And when you get into the idea of, what is the most fundamental, element we need to sustain life other than water? Well, food. Right. And who's buying up the farmland? Now, what is not really known also is that farming is one of our GDP products. We can become the most advanced technological country in the world, but you still need farms. It's corn, it's rice. Rice is one of our core GDP products. And who is buying that up? Well, it's China.
Yeah.
And they do this in other countries too. It's not even just the United States. This is one of the ways the Chinese Communist Party tries to control other countries. Case in point, they'll go into, for example, Australia. What is the GDP product in Australia? It's minerals. It's copper and things like this. Who bought up all the copper mines? China. Who controls the Australian economy then? China. They did the same thing, for example, in New Zealand. What's the GDP product? It's dairy. Who controls all the dairy farms? China. Who controls the New Zealand economy? China. And that means when the politicians want to do something, who do they have to go to? It's China. They're trying to do the same exact thing in the United States.
Wow. All of this brings to mind sort of a question for me. Quite famously, when he was president, President Richard Nixon, a hardcore anti-communist, if ever there were one, whose career took off when he went after Alger Hiss and spies in the State Department and all this kind of thing, stunned the world by going on television and announcing that he was going to China. Did Nixon's, and this became sort of a catchphrase that when people would describe something that being totally flipped upside down, they'd say it's another Nixon goes to China situation. Do you think Richard Nixon made a mistake?
I think Nixon made a fatal mistake for the United States, which I believe we have one chance to overturn. And I do believe the attempts are being made on that right now. I think we've come so close to losing our sovereignty to the Chinese Communist Party that if nothing is done right now, it will be forever lost. That's how serious I think it is. And I mean that not just in, I'm not just trying to make big phrases here. I'm not just saying that. I mean that in the most fundamental term. Because this is, when I look at China, I look at a very different element than maybe most people have. My work as an investigative reporter started when I was exposing what is now known as the secret Chinese police stations. This was way back in 2008 when I was doing on-the-ground research in New York City, and I found that there were front organizations of the Chinese Communist Party working to infiltrate politics, local government. They had a politician they're trying to push. They wanted to become the mayor of New York. He later got investigated by the FBI, and his campaign ended, I believe, maybe partly because of my reporting.
Wow.
But they do these things. They call them tongs, front organizations. And this is tied in with the Chinese Communist Party, what they call the United Front. When you hear about these secret Chinese police stations, those work with what they call the United Front. And these are not minor organizations. In New York City, some of these tongs, they have tens of thousands of members. In Canada, some of them have hundreds of thousands of members. And these are the organizations where every one of those members is going to be working in a major company or a major industry, and some of them are very well spoken, and they're going to be inviting all your businessmen on trips to China. They're going to be inviting all your influencers, all the YouTubers and TikTokers and everyone else, and you can see that happening right now, to China. And they wine and they dine them, and they feed them every propaganda narrative you can imagine. They get them to become basically advocates for the Chinese Communist Party. They do it to politicians. And when they go there, they're not only exposed to propaganda, they're exposed to, different traps. There's honey traps, for example, which is, pretty girls oftentimes. They'll drug them to make them more susceptible to it. They'll blackmail them. There's also business traps. The Chinese Communist Party manipulates what it calls four flaws in human nature: lust, money, power, and fame. And so you got to think, a politician, well, they'll back your campaign. They'll mobilize these tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people to do campaigning for you, grassroots stuff. They'll protest for you. The students will come out. They will literally bus around voters for you. In fact, in New York, they do this.
Wow.
They'll go to a lot of the retirement homes. They'll just put them on buses and drive them around. This was known. This was not even controversial before 2020. Right? This was known and talked about, and it was not seen as partisan until 2020 in the elections. And so when I think about the Chinese Communist Party, I maybe view it a bit differently. Because I think Richard Nixon, good on him for trying to do what's best for the country, but I think he had a fundamental misunderstanding of what communism is. Because a lot of people misunderstand communism as merely being an economic theory. That is not what communism is. Absolutely not. When I talk about communism, I'm talking about dialectical materialism. And what is dialectical materialism? What many in the past would call the living soul of Marxism. Dialectical materialism ties in with the more religious element of communism. Communism, until around the 1930s, was considered a metaphysical theory, not a political theory. It was a religion. In fact, even in the time of Karl Marx, it was debated on religious ground. The other leading group trying to take control of the Communist Party, which predated Karl Marx, by the way, was the Communist Church. And they were Owenites. Wow. And if you read their stuff, it's crazy. I mean, if you read early Austrian economics books, for example, Ludwig von Mises, he talks about this. Even at that time, this was known, and that's how communism used to be debated. And if you read their stuff, it's crazy. History of Austrian Economics, Volume 2. They say that one of the leading ideas of the Church of Communism was to merge Satan into God. And I'm not even joking. I'm talking about an economics book here, not a conspiracy book. You know what I mean? Right. And if you read Ludwig von Mises' book, I believe Socialism, he talks very in depth about dialectical materialism. What is dialectical materialism? It is strategic inversion. Now, not to get religious with y'all, but what is Satanism? It is religious inversion. You just take Christianity and flip it upside down. It is the intentional violation of every moral code of Christianity. You're doing the opposite of what the religion teaches. It's the intentional practice of that. What is dialectical materialism? It is identify, contradict, and eliminate the middle. You identify an issue, you flip it upside down, you say there's no middle ground, and you use that opposite to agitate the values, the politics, and the standards of a society. And what are you watching right now in the world? You're watching every one of our values get flipped upside down. They build social movements around the inversions of it, and they use that to agitate the incumbent values and politics of a society. That is what communism is. That is communism, not economics.
Right.
And so, in terms of economics, they do it because they want to control the society. They want to control the livelihood of the society. They want to seize the means of production. And when Nixon went to China, that's what he gave them. He gave them control of the fundamental elements of our country, and they used that not to become less communist, but to make us more communist. They made us less free. They did not become more free. That's what happened.
So how does, what is the military component of all of this? I mean, how does that affect us and our relationship with them and all of that?
Okay, so again, maybe when I look at China, I'm looking at a different element than most people. I would say the power of the Chinese military is not in the military itself. The power is in the United Front. The power is in the thing we're not watching. The power of the Chinese Communist Party, the true military force, is in what you call unrestricted warfare. And while we're watching, the J-20, their stealth fighter jet and so on, it's a ripoff of a 4.5 generation Soviet jet. It's old. It does, even from a basic understanding of like jets, it does not meet the basic standards of what it claims to represent. Do you know why Russia's invasion of Ukraine failed? Like, you know, they wanted to have a blitzkrieg. They wanted to roll in 2 weeks, boom, they make a deal. You know what stopped it? They had Chinese-made tires on their vehicles, and when they had the whole convoy rolling in, they got a bunch of flat tires and they got stuck on the roads.
Wow.
Made in China tires ruined their invasion plan. That's what happened to them. They got stuck on the road. And I remember those videos, and people were saying, well, geez, you got a whole convoy. Why don't you hit them with like an A-10 or something? They didn't do that.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. They let them sit on that road. And what happened is Ukraine was able to bolster a proper defense. And when they rolled in, it got stuck. The training of the Russian military is about on par with the Chinese military. It's a Soviet-based idea, absolute hierarchy. Basically, the leader tells you to walk, you're going to keep walking. You run into a wall, you're going to stand in front of that wall until you're told to walk around the wall. There's no individual thinking involved, and it doesn't work. That's why when America goes to war, we run circles around them. They kill a commander. The next guy in charge takes command. He's like, he's a football player. You know what I mean? And these kids, they strategize, they move. They strategize, they move, and we're unpredictable. Their military is predictable. Everything comes from the top. Nothing is outside of that. And everything they do is real, just calculated from the top. The individuals have no sovereignty in terms of what they do. They're not very good. Military equipment-wise, they're about the same as Russia as well. We saw how well that worked. But if I talk about the true Chinese military, I'm talking about something else. During the time of the Cold War, the Soviet Union, what was the main force of the Russian military? It was not the military itself. It was active measures. It was subversion. It was the people trying to undermine the basic pillars of a society. And you can watch guys like, there's an old Soviet defector who went viral online for a long time. It's Yuri Bezmenov. And he detailed this because he was a propagandist, I believe with Pravda.
Wow.
And so he came out and he said, what are active measures? What is ideological subversion? It's the theory that there are certain pillars of a society that maintain social cohesion, that make you who you are. What are those? It's your harmony between neighbors, right? It's what is a country for that matter? I mean, to get to a more fundamental level. What is the difference between a country and a tribe? A country is a unity of tribes. And what are tribes? It's individual religions, individual cultures, individual races. A country has to unite cultures, races, and religions under a common idea. And so communism, through active measures, the Soviet Union did it, tries to destroy those common ideas. And they try to create social tensions between these organizations. It's the creation of, again, going back to the time of like Mao,
Right.
Karl Marx, what was the narrative of communism? It was class struggle. They want to have struggle because it was based on Hegelian dialectical theory, again, predating Karl Marx, like Hegelian dialectics, which is to, they would say that contradiction leads forward. In other words, a type of social Darwinism applied to politics. You get people to struggle against each other, and they believe that the struggle will result in survival of the fittest, and you'd have social evolution. That progress of social evolution is what they call progressivism. And so class struggle or social struggle is the ingredient they believe you need for this. I mean, it doesn't work, obviously. You destroy social harmony, you destroy the society, as we've seen over and over again. But what they did in the U.S. was they found that, well, class struggle doesn't work so well with us because we're not really stuck in a single class in America. We can move up and down, you know what I mean? And so what they did instead was created a type of struggle that exists between everything. This is when you get into critical theory, critical race theory, critical gender theory, and so on. Creating struggle between every dialectic of society, every difference, and manufacturing that and using it as a tool to tear down our society. The Chinese Communist Party, through its United Front, does this. And this is why when you look into Black Lives Matter and you look into those protests happening in American colleges, you always find the CCP behind them in some regard.
Yeah. Well, we only have a few seconds left, but as quickly as you can, tariffs are in the news with China. What are your thoughts?
The worst move that was ever done was the handing off of our factories to China. Now, you could argue that part of that was NAFTA as well, where a lot of our businesses went to Canada and Mexico, but a lot of them went to China. The wealth of China, the new China, as they call it, was not created by communism. It was created by Western capitalism.
Right.
It feeds off Western capitalism. The money, the jobs, the production of the United States was offshored. And if we're going to survive as a country, we need to bring that back. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Instructive for us all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.